Welcome to the last session of the day. I hope you're all awake and not sleepy from lunch. My name is Kathleen Beck. I'm a UX engineer at a company called Oomph. We are a full-service web agency located in Providence, but we have recently gone remote in our hiring remote developers and designers. My role on our team is I'm part of the front-end team. I do a lot of Drupal site building along with theme implementation. I've been focusing a lot on accessibility and how we might be able to make our internal process of building sites just that much easier and more efficient. So, what we'll be discussing today. I'll talk about the different teams I've worked with, the roles I've played on those teams. I'll also talk about the tools and processes that I've used throughout the years. We'll talk about what my company, or the company I work for, what we're currently doing to try to maintain and reuse code across projects, even within the same project. And then I'll discuss what we hope to achieve for the future in our company in maintaining these code snippets. And then the why. I've been working in Drupal a very long time and building websites with teams, and I'm constantly asking questions of how can it be better. And something I say more often than I like to say when it comes to Drupal is, I don't know what I don't know until I know it. So I saw some smirks and laughs. You must experience the same thing. So I've been building websites for a few years now. I started back in 2006 as an intern. My college actually required a 15-week full-time internship for your last 12 credits of your degree. So I went to school for graphic design and got onto a web company, and I learned the ins and outs. I learned everything. I really liked the building of websites. So for about 8 years there, I was the primary Drupal site builder and themer in a very small shop of, at one point it was 2 of us, at another point there were 7 of us. So I got to know all aspects of a project working there. Now I'm working at Oomph. It's a bigger team. We have more not so much siloed departments, but we definitely have people who are doing the design, people who are doing the site building front end, and people who are doing the custom development work. So I'm working with larger teams, working on larger projects. So some of the tools I've used over the years: Go Live. Hands for anybody who's used these. Go Live, Dreamweaver, Coda, and now I'm using Sublime Text. That's my default one now. And then for a while we were using Grunt. Anyone? Brunch. And now we actually have circled back to using Gulp again. And then for our frameworks, we've used Foundation. We've used Bourbon and Neat. And now we're on to using Bootstrap 4. Awesome. So that's kind of like the background of tools that I've used and the company's used. Some of the environments that I've worked in, I dabbled in Drupal 4.7 for a little while. Didn't actually build anything in that version, but I've been around from 5, 6, 7, and now 8. 6 was great. 7 was awesome. 7's probably going to stick around for a long time, but 8. How many people are working in Drupal 8? All right, a bit more than half. I love it way more. if you worked in both. The twig templates are easy. It's just, I feel easier overall. Some environments we've used throughout MAMP or MAMP Pro. Vagrant running like a virtual box or just a virtual box machine. Then we turned over to Vagrant running Drupal VM. Anyone use Drupal VM? And then now we are running Lando, which runs on top of Docker. Anybody here use any of those? Awesome. So I'm gonna touch base on that Lando running on Docker a little bit later. And some of our build tools we are using, a lot of our projects are on Jenkins, which will take your files and build them onto your server. Now we're switching over to Travis. Travis is going to do all our builds, going to do all our testing, our automating testing for PHP, for JavaScript, for Sass linting. It's all going to be handled through Lando and Travis moving forward. So how is Oomph kind of handling maintaining and reusing componentized code? I asked some of my coworkers on the spot the other day, like, what do you like or don't like to see when you inherit a site or a theme from someone else? And one of my coworkers, I preferred it to be right, but if it's not, at least let it be consistent. Like, yeah, enough said. So on our team, the designers, what role they're playing in trying to systemize, maintain, reuse components is the design team is working in Adobe DX, XD. They're also using Avocode, and Envision app. And this is because we have designers that are remote, a couple in-house and then another designer remotely, and they found using these tools they're able to collaborate and share design assets and comment and feedback amongst themselves. But the design team is not just thinking about those pieces in their silo, they're working with the rest of the team. We do a lot of work with paragraphs module. We like that, our clients like that, so we've realized it's a little limited, so our design team and our development engineering team have actually met outside of project time and have started working on a new Oomph paragraphs module that's up on Drupal.org. Now I'll talk a little bit about that in the next slide. But then the designers are also thinking about where their functionality or components are coming from. As a company, we've decided to use Bootstrap 4. It has a good chunk of stuff that we'll be using. There's stuff we don't need. So we're still in this figuring out exactly what parts of Bootstrap we want to use, and then what third-party libraries might we use for things like, if it doesn't need to be a fully integrated Drupal module with the calendar, can we use the jQuery date picker library? Flex slider. Do you add the module? Do you add a library? The library has a little bit more features, but you can take those functionality pieces, talk to the design team and say, hey, this is where we can start. Like, easily. All I have to do is plug it in, click a couple buttons, and this is what we have. If you can move your arrows over here, you will save me 5 hours. So having these conversations about what can be done earlier on helps the design team know what they can use and reuse and whatnot. So the developers, on the team, like I've mentioned, have started Scaffold, a framework for us, but it's out there on GitHub, so it's open to all of you. GitHub.com/oomphinc/Drupal-scaffold. Let me pull that up. So this is that, and you can see the instructions for getting started is very easy. Pretty much you need a composer. After that, through composer, you get Lando, and then Lando pretty much installs it all. You run those few codes, and it pretty much gets you a running Drupal site. Feel free to play around with it, then we also have the Oomph paragraphs module that I was talking about, and we've done a lot of work to let clients be able to control a lot of assets within the paragraphs bundle or row on the output. So there'll be stuff like background colors, animation, things like that we're building into this module, where on the back end users have just an interactive admin area, and it can really give a beefy site and give the client a lot of control over their content, especially if you add in options for icons, options for colors, backgrounds, text, and then add the variables into these markup templates. It can be pretty powerful, so feel free to grab that and play around with it, and always add an issue if you come up with something, and we're kind of monitoring these two projects pretty well. So that was the developers. So I have a bit more on the front-end themer side of the company, since that's like my area of expertise. So I have a little more thoughts on this. Probably, I'm on my second Drupal 8 site over the past 2.5 years, I guess. So it's been a little, not as many sites as I'd like, but for each project I've learned. My first one, I loved Twig. I was like, Twig's awesome. You can do so much more powerful in like human simple language. And then I realized that I got a real good handle on BEM. How to use it, when to modify it, where the underscores and the dashes go, and what it all means. I really got to wrap my head around that. And then, so I learned that in that project. I moved over to this new project I'm working on. So I carried over how I want to use my template files. View modes I've fallen back in love with. Sorry, I just had a brain freeze for a second. So I've been using view modes, using views with content type, so with view modes versus views with fields, doing some cool stuff with theme suggestions to get the templates you want, also doing some form alters in the theme file, because forms are kind of really hard to get theme suggestions to get the templates you need. I've also really dug into includes, extends, embeds in Twig, macros, whoa, my mind was blown, variables both in Twig and Sass, and then just mixins and functions for Sass. Those are kind of the things where we've been focusing on, or at least I have in the projects I've been working on. I do want to show you some examples of what I've been working on, how I've been trying to think about these things while working on a team, not just an in-house team, but a remote team. Also a team that might grow and we might get new employees that don't know anything about the projects. So I've been really kind of focusing all my work through, all right, if someone new comes onto the project, would they understand what I'm doing? Would they know where to look for that style? Is this named right? So those are things that like are constantly in my head, and I've been able to kind of finally get some tangible results, especially in Drupal 8, in not so hard of a way. So if we look at, let's see. So in Drupal, you have your content types, you have your fields, you have views, you have blocks. Your content types also have view modes that you can add on to. So I want to show you how I've created a content type for a publications. I'll show you the fields I have in them, then I'll show you the different types of teasers I've created. I'll explain why I created the different teaser view modes. Then I will show how they display differently on the site, how I've named the markup, how I've used some includes, some macros, and whatnot, just to keep my code cleaner, reusable, and letting my team know what's going on with the code I'm making. So I can talk and see at the same time. So if we start with all right, so we have content type here, and that is an article. Publication. So here you see we have our default publication. We have a bunch of fields listed. Here I still do my field formats and some settings, very similar to how I was handling things in Drupal 6 and Drupal 7. But where that end, that's kind of where I stop using my admin UI, kind of on the manage field side of things. When you come down here, you can add some teaser types by default. Teasers usually here. I've gone in and created additional display modes that you can then enable per content type. So for this content type, I've enabled the teaser feature, and a teaser no image. The reason why I created 3 different teaser view modes is on the output, they look different. They have different image presets. It was pretty easy just to do this. You'll see my teaser here. Just has these 3 fields. The title gets printed in the markup, but my image is using a rendered teaser, so there's specific image preset on that. If you go to the teaser feature one, you'll see that my rendered image is using a different view mode on the media. This is so I can have kind of the same markup but use different images. And then pretty much the same information with just no image, a little less information. And where I'm using these, so my teasers on my site are text or image and text. whether that text is title, subtitle, dates, taxonomy, body, links, image, text. So when I'm calling my regular teaser, it's always going to have an image with text. I've later on gone and determined that my teasers can be stacked, inline, reverse inline, or overlaid. It's kind of the only way the teasers are ever going to display on this site. So these are my publication teasers. Then we have the feature publication teaser. We had to add a continue link, and we had a very different image preset for this. And then the other ones just use the regular teaser. But if you go to a different section of the site with related content, this publication does not have an image. I didn't want to just hide the CSS for this. It was hard to get an if statement in that teaser file, because that is a view block of a related content. So there was a lot of logic to get that there. So I didn't want to then just hide stuff. So it was easy to create a new template file. And then with those teaser modes, let me see. So I've created a template just for teaser. And as you can see, it extends the basic node template. In the node template, we have two sets of block content. So when we go in our teaser, we have our first set of block content, and we're able to piggyback some of our content types because they're using the same field, the same markup. So that will, on my teaser, print my image, if there is one, for my publication. And then down here, when the publication is a teaser, this is the text markup that we have for that teaser. Just something quick to note, if you need to render a regular label inside translation tags, you'll have to set it here and then render it here, because if it's inside the translation tag, it translates it twice, it gets a little weird. So that's the way to get around it, to get your translations in your template files. And again, you'll see very similar layouts for the teaser no image, and then the teaser feature. So whenever there's a teaser, you know where to look for all that markup. Whenever there's a teaser no image, you know where to look for all that markup. And so within those teasers, you have all your fields. And so, sorry, I jumped around there for a second. So in your view modes, you have your fields. If your field styles are the same, try to break that component down to the field. That's the best way, I think, to reuse your code. Then it would be by the object, that teaser, that view mode. An example of a field template that I'm using. So right here, this is a subtitle. This is a subtitle. So is this. As is that. As is this. And as is that. So in my admin, we've used the same field subtitle for all of them. So I've actually created a field template for it right here. So I am extending my default field template here. We removed a couple levels of divs, it's just a little cleaner, and left the main classes. But when you come into the subtitle, we are extending that, but then we're adding a unique wrapper class to those fields. So that allows me to have a style called field subtitle, and these are my main subtitle classes or styles. Then you get your modifiers. Luckily, Drupal kind of gives you some nice modifiers out of the box. Well, actually I had to, for that page node type, I had to add a theme suggestion in my theme file to get that. But that's a very useful piece of information, and that's at the body class level. So you can always kind of tie into that. Most of your teasers on your site will have the node view mode. Notice these match my view mode classes exactly. So whenever the subtitle is in a teaser, it's going to do that, except when it's in the teaser overlay, it needs to change to white. Every subtitle field in my project, this is where you find all the styles. I've been trying also to name my files and my styles files very similar, so that if someone comes in and inspects the subtitle field, they see that class, they have this field. They know the class goes there, they know the styles go here. It's all very high level, pretty organized. So I mentioned we're doing some bootstrap, so these are my bootstrap variables. And then these are all components in my site. I try to break them out into as small components or fields files as I can, because I want myself and my team to look at this very high level list here and go, where should I go to adjust my search field? Components, form, search, right there. That's where I'll start. So on top of naming conventions, I'm also doing stuff like, where's a good example? Just really documenting. You'll see tons of code pretty much on every selector I have. It's just there for me, for other people on my team. So we have this markup in one of our section tags, and it's an H2. People will probably look here for it because it's in this component, but I don't want styles really here because I want people to go to the typography file, look here, find what you need, or see if there's something similar. But all my header styles are all in here, using modifiers when need to. So I try to make my twig naming structure, my Sass naming structure, and my JavaScript naming structure very similar to each other, so we know what templates go with which piece. If we're breaking them down to smaller components and not just the homepage styles, or not just the contact form styles, you might have form and then a broken out one for contact like I have here with search. And again, just documenting why you're doing things. I found helpful with that. Also, documentation. As you see, I have the comments here. But as a company, we've started adding this docs file at the project level. And inside are just README files, pretty much, Markdown for GitHub. And I'll just put some information like this, where if you're new to the project, you want to get your head around some high-level information, things like this can just really help with that. Because once you see there's this macro, you can look at the macro that I've created. And in here, I've listed all the modifier classes that can be applied to this macro, how to use this macro, and then the actual code. Again, my mind was blown when I learned this. It's like mixins for HTML. Sorry, let's get back on track. Does anybody have examples of what we're implementing, how it might work for you guys? All right, I'll keep going. We do have a plan on where we're going, because words are hard. Some of our first steps are going to be naming conventions. As a company, I think it's very important to all speak the speak. So we work on both WordPress and Drupal sites. Do we call a detailed page a node? Do we call it a single? Do we call it a detailed page? What do we call it? Who calls it a node? Anyone? Anyone call it a detailed page? Anyone call it a single? Other? And then card versus teaser. What's the difference? In this project, I started naming everything teasers. And then all of a sudden, I named one thing card. And I was like, what the heck are you doing? Go back and fix that. And I did, and I'm glad I did, because I had to build upon that piece. And if I didn't, it would then now make no sense. If someone else jumped on the project, they'd be like, but what's the difference? Sliders, slideshows, carousels? I would guess sliders are just the slide. Slideshows maybe have arrows, carousels with thumbnails. Moving forward in the age of accessibility, they're all going to kind of work the same. You're going to need to have arrows. You're going to need to have pause and play buttons. You're going to need to read out information. So getting these words right now might make it easier down the road. Forms, contact forms, Drupal core forms, web forms.
Depends which it is. Those aren't the same thing.
Yeah, I know. We just came up with I just read an SOW that through the whole project, we've been talking about using Drupal default forms. All of a sudden, I look at the SOW to double check. It says web form module. Is that a artifact of a Drupal 7 SOW? Or was there actually a requirement for web forms? Because there's a big difference there. So words, getting the words right internally and with your clients is huge. And things that I try to do is our client presented us with So we co-designed this. So they provided some designs, and they were calling them singles, WordPress. So whenever I would reply back, I would say the no detail single. Get everybody on the same page with what you're trying to say, so there's no confusion of if you're talking about that little spinner thing there or the big carousel of images. Words are hard. Anybody else have some hard words that they debate over? Another one of mine is body, description, or content.
Content, you get huge problems with content because some people are actually referring to something all completely different, like another stage, like a content server for media, and they really mean like a stack of media, whereas other people will be the content is what the editors are putting in, end users are putting in, and then still other people would have the content as something that is the sequel so that they can have a separate server for that than the dev server so that the files are kept in version control and so it's the sequel. So you've got 4 different things that are commonly used almost every day in my job.
Yep.
They're all called content.
Yeah, so like getting real clarification within your company on which one of those content things you're going to need to work on is very important because you could spend hours on a completely wrong task. These are the things I'm bringing to my team. Like, am I the only one worrying about these? We have internally decided on title, not header. That's about it. So, class names modifiers, you got the free for all. If you're the only one on the team, it works. BEM is, I'm starting to love it, but I'm also starting to realize it gets really long in cases. There was a really good article on CSS tricks. It's Sen and Bio, which includes the scalable, extendable, maintainable codes along with BEM and inverted triangles and object-oriented code. What it introduces is ideas like appending things with O for object, U for utility, P for a pattern. I think we might be moving towards that way. I kind of like it. I don't like that in some cases they pre-pended dashes. Maybe it wasn't even this one. It was another one, but it was weird. But I do like this. I think it could cut back on your BEM being default class plus modifier, default class plus modifier, default class plus another modifier. It helps save those, I think. But again, using Drupal's default modifiers, like I did with that subtitle classes, these are naming conventions Drupal will give you to every view mode. There is a theme suggestion right here that will give you your page node type information to get into template files. So you have a lot of core default stuff you can fall back on for modifiers instead of kind of coming up for your own. And that way your modifier happens for that content no matter where it is on the site, which can be very useful. Accessibility. We are trying to reuse code, find ways to reuse code, and not start from scratch. A lot of times accessibility kind of almost forces you to start from scratch because you have to like rethink the solution. if you get the solution and can then store it in like a code library somewhere, you can just take that code and reuse it throughout, and then your base code, you know, will be X amount of accessible just by out of the box. And it allows you to just slowly build in some accessibility stuff. Our company's starting to think about accessibility like responsive web design a few years back, where there was a time where we didn't know if we just did it because it was best practice, or did you put a line item and charge a client for it? We're feeling accessibility is the same thing. And we were doing some brainstorming, and having a code library could help us with some of that accessibility stuff, just being in a project out of the box, and then we can just say, hey clients, your site will be accessible out of the box moving forward, just like your sites are responsive now, just out of the box. It's not a thought. And moving forward, if you have that code that is accessible for this standard, and the standards then increase or change, you can go back to that one set of code, modify it there, and then have like one central source of information.
Some people are keeping those in a separate repo, so you have a repo of that code that you could copy out with Jenkins or something into any, particular set of CSS. So our next, besides naming conventions and stuff internally, our next big project, I guess, is figuring out what kind of code library works best for our company. We have people writing custom modules. We have a lot of Drupal development, a lot of Sass mix-ins, functions, doing some cool things like that. That would be nice to have some kind of library that would be sortable or stuff, whatnot. We have, there was this Jadu Pulsar on GitHub that looked potentially okay. We might go into that, look into that. Stack Overflow for Teams came out recently. We've kind of thought about that. A custom Drupal site with some fields. GitHub gists. So there's options out there, but I really want everyone on our team to use it and contribute to it, and that's like the hard part. How to maintain a library when you're just trying to work on your projects. So we're still on that inner workings of figuring out what solution for this library. We just know we want it. We've talked about maybe distributions, like it's half dozen, six the other, pros and cons for both. Has anybody else done any kind of code libraries or anything like this? Yeah.
We took a similar approach when I was at Isobar in like creating a starting point pattern line theme that would sort of house a lot of the stuff.
Gotcha. So like a base theme.
Yeah, technically more of like a starter kit than a base theme. So it's like not, because of Pattern Lab, it was really better just like clone this thing, work on it, and
Gotcha.
when we made new stuff that was worth it, we would sort of port it back into the original repo. And that's helped. It's a combination of configuration of Drupal as well as a Pattern Lab-based theme that ties together the paragraph style.
Yeah, that's part of the hard part, is trying not to tie it so much to Drupal, but tying it a little to Drupal. You don't want to force a project to use certain content type names. You don't want a project to have to use this specific field called this specific thing. That's why I think like macros might be the way to go. It's like chunks of code that you can place into a file adjust the markup, adjust what fields get rendered, and then that code can be called in elsewhere. I'm thinking that might be the way of moving forward, but again, we're still in that research stage because it's a tough one to think about when you want it to work for the whole team. Just a quick recap of what we talked about today. We talked about tools, teams, frameworks, environments that I've used over the years, and pros and cons about those. What our current Oomph is currently doing with reusable code, maintaining sites, expanding sites for ally work and stuff, and then we really hope to get some kind of library to maintain these assets out there. I think a good start is our Oomph scaffold and the Oomph paragraph work. And that's kind of it. Again, I'm Kathy. I work at Oomph. You can find me at kbeck303, pretty much on everything. And Oomph is hiring. We're hiring project managers, developers, front-end UX, and we are hiring in-house and remote. So oomph.is/hiring for our job listings. Any questions about anything I've talked about?
I have a question.
Yay!
When you're using BEM and stuff, how does that integrate with Bootstrap? If you're using, because you're using both.
I am using both.
Because their class names. How do you reconcile the two different ways of naming?
I've, for the most part, given up on Bootstrap class names, and I use the Bootstrap Sass mix-ins as often as I can, honestly. There's some areas where I'll leave the Bootstrap markup if it's just simple, and I might append my own. It's kind of hit or miss. It depends on like the actual feature and how much of the Bootstrap stuff we need.
Yeah.
Well, I'll be around here today and tomorrow. So if you see me around and think of any questions, feel free to ask. And thank you for coming.